we just get started now? Do we just start talking?
Let's do it.
Okay, it's fireside chat, so we pretend there's a fire here.
Yeah, there you go.
How about I introduce you, or you can introduce me first? When did I meet Lee? I think this was probably 2 years ago now. We got introduced through a mutual friend. Lee was involved with the U.S. Postal Service Board of Governors and the FAA Management Advisory Council. Formerly was involved in the Airline Pilots Association and Delta Airlines, F-18 pilot. Let's see, you're also involved with, you're on the board of a few companies. I don't know how much detail you're comfortable with me going into there, but Lee, let me just say Lee has a very unique set of insight into the aviation industry, both large operators as well as small operators and things that cross into the, I guess what we would call the regional air mobility realm. How's that for an intro?
That was great.
Okay.
All right, and I'll introduce Robert. So in the things that I was involved with, I would say in the last 20 years, I got more involved with aviation safety. So at the FAA, I was on several committees and then some stakeholder committees, some advisory committees, but safety was my number one focus. I heard about Reliable, I heard about Robert, and I saw the opportunity with Reliable and with Robert, what he was working on, that we could take safety to the next level. And for those of you who don't know Robert, Robert has worked with the Tesla autopilot system. And, you know, I think we talked a little bit about it at one point, but remember full self-driving mode. At some point, there'll be two cars going 75 miles an hour on the highway opposite each other, and everybody will be comfortable. They'll be about 10, 15 feet apart. He was involved with with SpaceX, designing the autopilot system for the Dragon capsule, and then he started Reliable Robotics. And one thing I can tell you about Reliable and Robert is safety is table stakes. And a lot of what we've been talking about just in the last panel, maybe we take safety for granted a little bit, but all it takes is one of these accidents, incidents, mishaps, and it's going to grind everything to a halt. So how's that, Robert?
That's pretty good.
All right.
Why don't we start with me asking you a question? Given your background and experience in the aviation industry, you've seen a lot of things, and you have a lot of personal experience as a pilot. Many hours of experience in the cockpit of many different aircraft. You also, I forgot to mention too, you maintain your currency and you fly quite frequently in your Piper. So as a pilot, when you think about automation systems, both professionally and flying recreationally, how do you view automation as changing what it means to be a pilot or aviation?
All right, so I'm just going to take a couple of minutes on this, and I don't want to be called at happy hour tonight a legacy system. If you do that, then that's going to be a foul. But I started when there was no autopilots and no auto throttles and no anti-skid, and you actually flew the airplane, you taxied out, you did everything, right? And then the first autopilots showed up. And they basically maintained your altitude, and everyone loved that. And then there were auto throttles. Then there were FADECs for engines. There's probably another technology before FADEC. But each technology made it where the pilot could focus on other matters and pilot the system, but manage the system better. And it's continued to the fact that today there are airlines that fly airplanes that are manufactured by the two major manufacturers in the world, that dispatch that airplane to an autoland. So they take it off, they put it on autopilot at 400 feet, it flies the route, and then it auto lands, and then they disconnect the autopilot and they taxi it in. So we've come from where we were to where we're at currently. Okay, yet we still have mishaps. We still have mishaps, we still have accidents. Now, in commercial aviation in the US, we've had a very successful run knock on wood, since the Colgan accident a few years ago. We've had a great run without a major U.S. accident, although it's been very close. We've had several very close calls. But in general aviation, we have reported, okay, because there's a lot of not reported accidents, north of 1,000 general aviation accidents a year in the U.S., and we kill people over the last few years, and we accept that 150 to 300 people a year in general aviation. The autonomy technology that's being developed by Robert's company, which I want him to talk about, has the potential to prevent that, to make it safer. That's where we're heading. So what does that look like on first day, which I heard from the last panel? Well, it is crawl, walk, run. It is remote monitoring, remote operating, autonomy. That's where we're headed. And that'll make it safer, and that'll be better for everyone. Now, having said that, Robert, my question to you would be, what's the practical application? What's the business case as you are developing STC for a certified airplane, Cessna 208, a certified airplane that is already certified at 10 to the minus 9 with one pilot? Where's your company, where's Reliable going with that?
Yeah, I'm glad we're getting this out of the way because this is something that comes up quite often. You know, as Lee mentioned, our go-to-market initially is around building an STC for the Cessna Caravan. If you're not familiar with the Caravan, this is a very popular cargo aircraft in the United States and other parts of the world. In the passenger configuration, it holds about 12 people, and the cargo configuration can carry about 3,000 pounds, just to give you a sense of scale. It's a very significant popular aircraft, and so it is single pilot, and so people go, autonomy, well, what's the business case for that? Let me tell you. Okay, so it's difficult to find people to perform this job today. It used to be flying the Caravan for the cargo industry was a good job to get in to fly one day for the majors, and that's just simply not the case anymore for a variety of reasons. The military isn't producing as many pilots as they used to be. Young people aren't choosing this as a career. The other reason is we've really have changed the number of hours that are now required for both regulatory and for insurance reasons. And so flying a vehicle like a Cessna Caravan that flies relatively low hours per year is not a great way to build time. In a Caravan, in our operation today in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we fly Caravans, our pilots are averaging about 250 to 300 hours a year. And if you need to get 1,500 hours to fly for the majors, you're going to be there for a while. And there's much faster ways to do that. So for many operators of Caravans, the threat of them being able to continue their business due to lack of interest by pilots is just increasing every year. On top of that, you have insurance costs are rising, training costs are rising. It used to be relatively straightforward, but as standards have increased, as they should, SMS is now a requirement for many Part 135 operators. It just becomes a lot more difficult to get and retain people in for this role. The other thing, too, I want to go back to is the number of hours these aircraft operate per day. A Caravan operation flying cargo in the United States is typically going to fly about 45 minutes in the morning and about 45 minutes late in the evening. They do these out and back operations. So just to make this more real, in our operation in Albuquerque, we've got a couple of aircraft that start in Albuquerque around 5, 6 a.m. They go to places like Durango, Colorado, Gallup, New Mexico, Farmington, New Mexico. It's a really short flight. Pilot stays in a hotel for 6 to 8 hours and then turns around and comes back in the evening. With autonomy or with automation and remote piloting the aircraft, what you can do is you can effectively increase the utilization of that pilot throughout the day. You can compact their schedule so that they can fly more aircraft back to back. In the Albuquerque example, not all those aircraft need to be at their destination at the exact same time, and so we can stack aircraft up. You can't teleport pilots around in the real world, but you can effectively teleport them around with autonomy. And so our analysis has shown that we can relatively quickly get the utilization of that pilot in the very near term, at least double, possibly triple, or even quadruple longer term. And so that's where the savings come in. But where things get really interesting is when you start to do this on larger vehicles, and when you step up to other aircraft that are flying cargo or will be flying cargo, like the Cessna Sky Courier, ATR, et cetera, the economics become much clearer, much faster, and it doesn't require a 3-minute explanation.
So Robert, let's just build on that a little bit. You know, we kind of pivoted into general aviation because of safety, and like I said earlier, safety's table stakes. It has to be safe. But Reliable's also working with the military, where the utility of these airplanes become very important. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with the Air Force and with other members of the, with other branches of the government with Reliable's product?
Yeah, it's all the things that we were just talking about. It's safety, it's training, it's utility of the aircraft, it's flexibility, being able to operate at more hours of the day, more frequently for longer durations. For those that aren't familiar, we've been doing a number of exercises. We participated in a number of exercises this last year for the U.S. Air Force as part of some Air Mobility Command and Air Combat Command tests. And we showed up with our Caravan. Joby X-Wing showed up as well. It was great to have them along. And we showed members of the U.S. Air Force what an autonomous system can do, but also what you can do with smaller aircraft. A small cargo aircraft for the Air Force is like a C-130, which kind of blew my mind. But you talk to them, and it really is. Like that's a small plane for them. And one thing we learned in these exercises that I thought was especially interesting is those aircraft cost the U.S. taxpayer, I think it's $19,670 per flight hour, effectively, according to a GAO report. Don't quote me, but it's somewhere around 19K. But what they're flying on these C-130s, they're palletizing these like World War II size pallets. They're putting these in a C-130, but the stuff that they're putting on the pallets are like the size of washing machines. These are like small radar components, they're spare parts. If they need to fix an F-35, they put it on a pallet and then they shove it on the C-130. And what the Air Force discovered through this exercise and other analysis they've done is actually about 90% of what they carry on a C-130 could fit on a Caravan. And so it was kind of this like big epiphany moment that, you know, we don't need to be hauling things around with these big massive machines. We can fly them on these small aircraft. And the other advantage of the small aircraft is you don't have to fly these daisy chain routes like they do with the C-130. If you imagine a hypothetical network of airports in a certain Pacific Ocean near a small island nation that's being antagonized by a larger nation, there's a lot of airports that would need to be visited in the event of something needing to occur or something occurring. And with the C-130, we just don't possess the resources within the Air Force to be able to immediately meet that need. But a fleet of Caravans operating in parallel could distribute parts faster. It's also very interesting too because it's a lot smaller, it's lower cost. And so, you know, if you're an adversary of the U.S. and you're trying to decide what to do with your $1 million object that can shoot things out of the sky, you might choose to not fire that at a Caravan, whereas with the C-130, it's a much bigger target. It might be a lot more interesting. There's just a lot of really interesting things that we've discovered through this process, and I'm very optimistic about where this technology can go with the Air Force. I also want to stress, too, since we're on the Air Force, that interoperation with civilian airspace is really crucial. And this is another misconception that I'd want to correct. Yeah, put your mic back down. The U.S. military has been flying autonomous aircraft for decades. It goes way back, and there's really nothing new when it comes to the automation of the aircraft itself. What is new, and what we're working on at Reliable, is integration of these systems into civilian airspaces. And it's that interoperation that's really key, and I think that's what's going to create the greatest threat to our adversaries. You know, if we're like routinely operating these things day in, day out, like it's no big deal, I think people are a lot less likely to mess with us.
So we only have a couple minutes, but I thought we'd touch on something that the panel before us was, they were highlighting and they were really having issues with. Why don't we talk just briefly about certification, how far you're down the road, how close you are to full certification in the national airspace.
Okay, so we have 3 hours, or is that 3 minutes?
3 hours.
Okay, I don't know how I'm going to pack certification into 3 minutes. Just say that certification is, there's a planning phase and there's an execution phase. We've gone through the planning phase for a continuous engagement autopilot, and this is, I think, quite revolutionary because we've gotten the FAA to agree to the certification basis, means of compliance, fancy words, for automated landing, automated takeoff, automated taxiing, which I think are really the key things that you need to operate an autonomous aircraft. I like to joke that if you want to operate an autonomous aircraft, the first thing you need is an autonomous aircraft. And we've gotten the FAA to agree on how to get those systems certified. We're now very much heads down, you saw it this morning, Lee, at our office, in execution mode. We're doing qualification testing on hardware. We're doing very, very detailed qualification tests on software. We're about to step into our formal flight test campaign. The next thing that we need to do with certification is we've been working with the FAA on how to certify our airspace integration solution. So this is our phase 2 that includes detect and avoid and our C2 link and our ground control station. And we've been working with the FAA on this for many, many years. Hundreds of pages of documents have been exchanged. And I feel like we're very close. I don't want to put a timeline on it because I don't want to. But we're very close to, I think, having a formal agreement with the FAA on how to get those 3 key technologies certified.
So earlier there was a discussion on VFR, IFR, and that was, I think it got clarified quickly. But detect and avoid in VFR is your eyeball. Okay, can you talk a little bit about how Reliable's been working on detect and avoid and has developed its own radar and its own detect and avoid system? And where you're at with that?
Yeah, there's only one standard, or really two. There's a suite of standards, but there's really only one suite of standards that the FAA has accepted for detect and avoid, and they have recognized this through the Technical Standard Order (TSO) process, and that calls for radar. That's just the reality. And as nice as it would be to have lidars and cameras and other systems, radar is the technology that the FAA has chosen. And there's a lot of good reasons why you would choose radar. And we started the process internally over a year ago now of building our own in-house radar that complies with these standards that the FAA has accepted. We're hoping to flight test that unit very soon. We've been doing some preliminary work over the last couple of months. There's a Space Act agreement with NASA that's coming together. There's an FAA contract we announced recently that's related to our beyond visual line of sight detect and avoid testing that's moving along quite well. But our intent is to use this technology for deployment in our system, but also I think it's got applications beyond our system. Think about for the pilots in the room, how many times have you been given a, traffic ahead, 1 o'clock, 1.5 miles, and you're staring out the window going, what the heck? I don't see it, looking. Our radar is going to give you a very precise dot, more precise than what you would get with ADS-B, that's certified and actually gives you certified guidance on how to avoid hitting that. So the next time air traffic control gives you an alert, you'll actually be able to say, I see it because I've got it on my certified piece of equipment.
All right, so Oscar, if you're in the room, that was our time, and I think we're done, and we're not going to get any questions, so there you go.
Thank you
Very much.